Hello and welcome to another webcast from tggeeks.com, where Ben and Keith, the two gay geeks, talk about all aspects of geekdom and nerdery. Sci-fi, comics, film, horror, genre, you name it, we talk about it. I am Keith Lane, your producer here at TG Squared Studios. Well, time to get back to our lives and back to webcasting after our break and a wonderful vacation. And that is what we will be talking about on this episode of TG Geeks Webcast, our Disney Cruise Line 7-night cruise to Alaska. We started with a stay in Vancouver, boarded the Disney Wonder, and cruised up the inner passage to the Tracy Arm Fjord, then down to Skagway, to Juneau, and lastly to Ketchikan. It was an awe-inspiring trip all the way around. Ben, what are your initial thoughts?
Wow. Well, I was initially very excited at the idea of checking out Alaska, but at the same time, when you think cruise lines, you kind of think tropical weather, like going to the Caribbean and things like that, which we've done before. So I didn't quite know what to expect taking a cruise into very cold temperature. Whatever, it was the most fun I've ever had between both Vancouver and the cruise itself. I had an absolute blast.
It really was. I had a great time. We went to Vancouver and just had a great time with a friend up there and wandering all over Vancouver. And then the cruise itself was just, as I said, awe-inspiring. So let's talk about Vancouver for a little bit. We'd been there before a previous cruise that we went.
Yeah, we were there 2 years ago.
Yep, 2 years ago we did the transition cruise from Vancouver down to LA on the same ship, the Disney Wonder. But this time, and that time we did the big bus tour, which takes you all over Vancouver, and it stops everywhere. You can get on and get off. And
it's a great thing to do if you are a first-time visitor to Vancouver.
Absolutely.
Because it really, it takes you all over the place.
Everywhere.
I mean, Vancouver is a very large city, and even then it doesn't cover the entire city. But it covers a great deal of it, and you get to see the majority of the really big hot spots. And at the same time, they kind of give a little bit of a history of Vancouver in terms of architecture, industry, things like that. I mean, it was very informative and a lot of fun to do that the first time. Yeah, so we did that 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was great because you get to stop at Chinatown and do all kinds of things. Go to Stanley Park, which is absolutely fabulous. And just all over Vancouver. So it's really nice to take that bus tour. It's worth the $84 or whatever it is. It's actually, you buy 1 day and you get 1 day free. So it's really worth $40 a day.
It's a great value.
Yep. So this time, instead of actually having really any plans to do anything, we have a friend that lives up there in Vancouver. And we met Tom on Friday afternoon or Friday evening.
Shortly after we arrived.
Yep. And we sat there in the lobby of the hotel and we had some appetizers and a glass of wine. And of course, being me.
What did you do?
Well, I was talking with my hands and proceeded to knock my full glass of wine all over me.
And it was such a good wine too.
It was. But anyway, we had a great time talking with Tom, and then he took us out for a regional favorite of what is it? Spoo? Is that what?
Poutine.
Poutine. Sorry, Spoo is something else. Anyway.
Yeah, poutine's it is a Canadian dish.
Yep.
I think I did some reading on it. I believe its origins are in Quebec. You're the more culinary person. What would you describe poutine as?
Well, basically what it is, it's fries and with gravy. Now, the gravy they talk about is it depends on the region that you're in and the actual of the local place that you go to as to what type of gravy they use. So it's kind of a brown gravy and then cheese curds on top of it. And the place that we went was some poutine palace or some, I can't remember.
It's a hole in the wall.
Yeah, but it's a chain, and they do poutine in multiple different styles. We did the country style that had peas and some other something, and then they have
mushrooms are in it.
Yeah, and
you can get pork.
they have all kinds of different styles of poutine that they have. So you get additional toppings besides the gravy and the cheese curds. And it was really, really good.
What I found
enjoyed
fun,
it.
what I really found amusing is that I can't remember. I think they were in line just in front of us, but there's a couple of guys who, just by looking at them, I could tell that they worked out. They were in excellent shape, and they saw us being a little bit hesitant. We were kind of newcomers to this, and they kind of looked at us and said, "This stuff is so bad, but it's so good."
They were kind of health nuts, and even they were eating.
They're eating. I mean,
poutine.
it's not exactly the most healthy dish,
Yeah,
but holy cow, was that tasty!
it really was. It was great. And then we walked around downtown. Tom showed us a few things, and then we went to another local favorite of Tim Hortons, and we had some coffee and ice cream and etc. So after that, we went back to the hotel. It was kind of late. We got in bed, and the next day it was, oh my gosh, overcast and kind of spitting rain.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So we decided, well, we'll put our rain jackets on, and we'll get our umbrellas, and we'll go over to Starbucks and have some coffee. And while we were there at Starbucks, it began to absolutely, well, for Phoenicians, it began to pour rain.
Yeah, not as bad as the rain that we've had the last couple of times here in Phoenix, but holy gosh, it was pretty thick at some points, and it lasted quite a while.
Yeah, it was more than I wanted to walk around with, even
with
with
an
an
umbrella.
umbrella.
Right.
So we walked back to the hotel, and we futzed around for a little bit and did some reading, and then kind of let it dry off a little bit. We continued. Then it settled down, and we decided, well, it's enough to venture out. So we still took our umbrellas, and we went out and we walked over to the train station. They have a great train system there, or subway system that goes all over the place, and it's relatively inexpensive if you have Canadian cash.
Yeah, it's quite nice. And we from that point we then hopped on a ferry.
Well, we went to Chinatown first.
Did we go to Chinatown? I know we went to North Vancouver.
Did we go? I don't remember that. Kind of, it's all muddled together.
Yeah.
The 3 days that we were there.
We did a lot.
Yeah, we'd gone to Chinatown, and we went and had
Dim sum.
dim sum, and then I think we walked back to the hotel.
Yeah, we did.
And then I think that's when we walked over to North Vancouver.
It's possible. No, because it began to rain while we were in North Vancouver.
Right. No, that was the next day.
Was that the next day?
So that
Oh
was the
my!
next day.
See, people, it is running all together.
It is. So and then kind of walked around, and that evening we just decided we would go have a nice dinner somewhere downtown, and we came back to the hotel and had some wine out on the patio and enjoyed ourselves.
Read some more.
Yeah, read some more. We've been reading several books by our favorite author, Jeannie Koch.
Yes, and you can find our interview with her. I think it's episode 7.
Yes, on tggeeks.com.
But yes, we've been reading her books like crazy. So that was all our reading while we were on vacation.
Yeah, so we had a great time, and then on Sunday, that's when we got up and we went over to the Flyover Canada Place.
Canada Place, it's a really nice convention center, which was, if I'm not mistaken, it was sort of put up because of the Vancouver Winter Games, because the Olympic torch is there.
Well, they have the torch there at least now.
Yeah, that's where the torch is there now. I don't think that's where they actually held the games, because just on the other side is water.
Yes. So it was that Flyover Canada was absolutely amazing, and we're big Disney geeks, so we are familiar with Soarin' Over California, Disney California Adventure, which is incredible. But this one over Canada,
it's breathtaking.
It's breathtaking. Some of the topography in Canada is just stunning.
I mean, you don't realize what a truly gorgeous country Canada is. I mean, it's absolutely magnificent. I walked away with sort of a new love for Canada and the people who live there.
Yep. And then that's when we went down we walked over to the train station, because we were going to see where we needed to get off the ship to get onto the train to go to the airport. And so we walked down, and then we went over to North Vancouver.
That's it.
Rode the ferry.
There's a ferry that takes you to
there.
North Vancouver, and there's a farmer's market there, so we kind of wandered around there for a while.
Yeah, and had a good time over there. And then we came back, and then we walked all over town. We walked from the train station downtown all the way to West Vancouver, and then down to the harbor and back to the hotel, which we were staying right down by Canada Place anyway, which is right on the harbor. And it was a great time. We just had a great time in Vancouver.
And while we were doing that walk, one of my greatest wishes had been realized. I found Encom Tower from Tron Legacy.
Yay!
I was delighted because, I mean, even though the building is pretty obvious, it's a very strangely shaped building. Anybody who's seen the movie, it's got 3 sides, and you can't really see that third side from most angles. It's when we were making the walk back that all of a sudden I could finally make it out, and it's the tallest building in that area of Vancouver. So I was my little Tron Legacy nerd fan was satisfied when I found it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun when we finally discovered that. And then that evening we went back over to Canada Place. There's a really great restaurant and pub there. It's called Tap and Barrel, and we did a flight of local BC wines, or British Columbia wines.
They were great.
And they were fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and had some great food there, and just
it was just such
ourselves.
a wonderful, and that was the last night we were in Vancouver, and I could not think of a better way to kind of have a little send off of what was a great time there. I mean, and I remember when we were having dinner, we were like, this is only the first part of the vacation. We still have another 7 nights on this cruise.
Exactly.
That we haven't even done yet. And we'd already had a pretty full vacation with just all the activity that we had done in Vancouver. It was so wonderful being there.
It was nice and relaxing. And the fact that we had no agenda going into it was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Other than, just a couple of little minor things. But other than that, there was really no agenda. We just had a great time, just sitting, relaxing, and walking all over town. It's a great walking city, and if you have to go anywhere of any distance, the train system is great too.
Yeah, they have a great SkyTrain system. Once again, compliments of I believe that was for the World's Fair, according to Tom.
Right.
The World's Fair brought that in, and that really is such a great convenience because that's how we were able to get back and forth from the hotel to the airport.
It was great.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
love Vancouver.
So then comes Monday morning, time for the cruise. Hooray!
Hooray!
And there was much rejoicing.
Yes, there was. Actually, yeah, because we were like so jazzed to go on this ship.
We took so much luggage because we knew we were going to have to be dressing up at least,
for colder weather.
For colder weather. And since we live in Phoenix, we don't know what cold weather is at all. So we packed a lot of stuff, more than we needed, but we took too much luggage. We only unpacked what we needed for the couple of days in Vancouver and left everything else packed, which probably was a mistake for my poor jacket, but oh well. So on Monday morning, I went over to Starbucks, which was just a block away, and to get some coffee. And yeah, I'm a nerd with coffee, and I'm a
coffee snob.
A coffee snob, yes. So I have to have my real coffee. And while I was over there, we were waiting for it to open. Of course, Canada celebrates.
They have Labor Day there.
Labor Day as well, the same time that we do. And we're standing there. I'm standing there waiting for them to open. And another couple walks up, and they're wearing a Walt Disney World hoodie. And I asked them if they were going on the cruise, and they said yes. And so we met Tom and Brigitte, or I met Tom and Brigitte, and we vowed that we would catch up during the cruise, which we did several times.
A number of times. It was awesome.
We had a great time with them, just talking, and we did a couple of things that we'll talk about shortly. And we actually were joined on the cruise. We had booked our cruise the year before.
Yeah, year before.
Yes, the year before. And unbeknownst to us, until after we had already booked the cruise, another friend of ours that we had cruised with the Mice Chat group, and Jen and her husband were going to join us on the cruise, and they invited some friends. So we had a nice little group.
It was a 7-person group. It was really awesome.
It was really nice. And that's the nice thing about cruising, I guess, if you've done a number of cruises, is you have these little, I won't say they're cliques, but you get to know people, and then you start cruising together, and you just have a great time vacationing together.
You start making these friendships,
yeah,
and they're really incredible. I mean, we've done this a number of times now, and in past cruises, we've made friends with not just other passengers, but with some of the crew as well.
Yeah. So,
It's a wonderful experience.
and of course, there's always adventures trying to get on the cruise ship, and we're showing up right as the other people are getting off the ship, and we're first in line to.
Yeah, because we want to be first on the ship.
Exactly.
Because I mean, you're anxious when you've done a Disney cruise. All you can think about is when it's time to board the ship. You just want to get on that ship. That's all you think about. And I'm sure for those people who've never cruised before, you probably, if you've talked to cruisers, you probably think, oh yeah, I've heard that before. But when you've done it, when you're about to get on board that ship, there's something truly, truly wonderful and magical about just when you board that ship.
Well, and especially on the Disney Cruise Line, I mean, there's so many things that you can do, and I assume on other cruise lines they have, tours and things like that. But we want to get on, and we want to just,
Soak
go-
ourselves up in that Disney atmosphere.
Exactly.
And there
just
is a very strong Disney atmosphere on the ship.
And the thing that we especially wanted to do is get on the ship and immediately go and sign up for. We did a wine tasting, we did a champagne tasting, and we did 2 whiskey tastings and
You did a cognac.
a cognac tasting. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. We had, of course, you have to get in there because there's a limited number of spots for those tastings, and it was just great.
And I want to talk about those a little bit later.
Yeah, we want to talk about that. And then, so we get on the ship, we do their brunch thing that they have, which is a really nice spread, and just relax. And
We
then-
ate on the deck. We met up with Jen, her husband, and their friends, the Blunts, Larry, Erin, and Victoria. And turns out they were also film nerds too, and they were showing us all the landscapes or of the Vancouver city skyline, saying, well, like this building here, that was in Smallville and stuff like that. So we were really geeking out, having a great time. I mean, it was just such a nice way to start that part of the vacation.
Yeah, it was. And then, then we had, what was it, a day at sea was the next day. So we just kind of relaxed and just calmed down, even though we were pretty much relaxed to begin with. And then the next day, we entered the Tracy Arm Fjord.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Just one big wow.
It was amazing because you cruise up the inner passage, and then it's kind of like there's mountains on either side, and it's a gigantic fjord itself, and the water is that bluey blackish, not like the Caribbean, but it's kind of just sea colored, and then you get into the Tracy Arm Fjord, and the water is this emerald green. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And then as you start in the fjord, and you see chunks of ice, and you see the waterfalls, and the chunks of ice are blue, that from the calving of the glacier that is actually at the other end. The Tracy Arm Glacier is right at the end of the fjord, and a fjord is actually a channel that has been cut by a glacier and filled up with water. So
morning, we should point out that morning there was an expert on the ship who gave it was dry. Holy cow, was this dry, but at the same time very informative about the nature of glaciers, and he had a really nice slideshow. And he went over to when we actually were approaching the glacier, he came in over the ship's sound system, and we were all just on the deck outside, cameras ready, taking photographs, and freezing to death.
Because as we approached the glacier, it was kind of spitting rain, and if you're on the front of the ship, and you're cruising in there pretty good until you get really close to the glacier, but because you're kind of going at a good clip, enough that it's rain in your face. And I didn't have. Did I have a hat on? I don't. Yes, I had a hat. But
you did have a hat.
I didn't have anything up around my neck or anything. It was cold and rain in my face and rain on my camera, and then it finally calmed down once we got
up to the glacier, and then the ship just stopped, and we just sat there for maybe 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah, well, we had stopped, and then he did a really, really slow turn to
Probably
180 to go back out.
Yeah, and part of the reason being is that there were blocks of ice and there were sea lions that were on the ice in the process of molting. So I think there were also some conservationists that did not want to see any kind of disruption to the natural environment. So to respect that, I think our captain insisted that we do a very, very slow 180 to get out of there.
Yeah, it was great. And while we were there, and it was overcast, so the glacier was just this intense blue. It was incredible. I've just never experienced anything like that. And we saw some calving. Hopefully I caught some I had on the
Explain
burst.
calving for people who don't know.
It is where the ice breaks down and you see it just kind of fall into the fjord
water.
itself, or the water itself. And that's what they call it, calving. So it just kind of calves off of the glacier itself. And hopefully we saw several of those, and I hopefully caught some on my photographs. Of course, the 1,200 photographs that I took on this trip,
Which we've yet to load onto the website.
to load on the website yet.
Sooner or later, we'll get to it.
One of these days.
Yeah.
One of these days. So that was the Tracy Arm Fjord, and we sailed back out, and then we were on our way
To our first port of
first
call.
port of call. And before we talk about the ports of call, we're going to take a break for just a moment. We want to thank Teresa Corey from Fairy Godmother Travel, who made all of our arrangements for this Disney cruise. Teresa and her army of vacation planners are official Disney vacation planners who can arrange vacations for Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney's Aulani Resort, and Adventures by Disney, among other Disney-related vacations. Give them a try for a pixie dust sprinkled trip. You can find them at www.fairygodmothertravel.com or call Teresa directly at 832-284-4002. She is an absolute delight to work with, no pressure, and she is going to work with you to get your vacation just right. Now back to our show. Okay, first port of call, Skagway, Alaska.
This is a sleepy little place.
3 blocks.
3
long.
blocks long. That's all it is.
But they have, and their population in the winter is what, I think 300 something or
At
500
most.
something? I don't remember, but
Because Skagway's, their big industry is tourism.
yeah, and Skagway is just up the peninsula, and it was the entrance to the Yukon, and the Yukon Gold Rush, and that's kind of what made Skagway famous. I mean, you had to get to Skagway. There, you can drive to Skagway. It's a pain in the butt,
Yeah.
but you can. But the most of them, before they built the Yukon Highway, or what, I think it's I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Anyway, before they did that, the only way in was by boat, and then you took the train into the Yukon, and then, during the Gold Rush days, then it was another 300 miles on foot
Roughly.
to the Gold Rush. But Skagway, it was kind of fun. We did ride the train from Skagway up to
It's Fraser, British Columbia.
yes, and it was a really neat train ride. It took
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, something like that.
To ride that train.
Yeah.
And we really climbed pretty high up in the mountains.
Yeah, it was great. It was really overcast. In fact, we were on the second trip. The train had already gone up and come back, and we were on the second trip. And by the time we got on the train, some of the overcast had come off. But the first one, everybody was saying, "Oh my gosh, the entire trip we were in the fog all the way up."
Which
So-
wasn't necessarily a bad thing. There were some people who were just really complaining about it. Says, I really can't see anything. But as being that Keith and I love photography, we were trying to find ways to make that overcast kind of work for us. And especially as we were getting higher and higher, to us, it was like being in this completely Twilight Zone-ish type world. It was really amazing. And when you get that high up, because the winters can be so fierce, the vegetation has evolved to take on a completely different kind of form than anything most people might be accustomed to. So
Right.
there's this really weird arid nature to it,
Yeah, there was.
but not desert-like.
Yeah, and when we finally got up to the top, we were up above the fog at that point, and they were pointing out, because they had a narration going during the train ride, and they were pointing out some of the trees, and some of those trees were maybe 6 feet, 8 feet, and they were over 100 years old, but they had, because it gets so much snow up there, and the vegetation has learned to adapt, and it's a very slow growing vegetation up there.
It was really remarkable to look at.
Really nice. And we had booked that prior to, and that was part of the port adventures and part of the cruising that, if you go on any cruise line, they have port adventures. And this was one of the port adventures in Skagway. And we decided only to do one port adventure.
Good thing.
Unlike our previous cruises, was we've had several port adventures to do.
In one
and just
day.
like run.
Yeah.
Decided this one's going to be relaxing.
Yeah. Not much fun when you're trying to do more than one in a day.
Yeah, so we didn't ride the train back, which was a different port adventure. You could ride the train up and then back. We had a bus that met us up in Fraser, and we rode back on a bus down the highway, and we got to see the other side because the train went up one side and the highway went down the other side of this big ravine, if you will, and it was kind of nice to come back on the bus. And then after we got back on the bus, we
just kind of wandered around
the 3 blocks that is
wandered around downtown Skagway. It was interesting. I mean, they did their best, I think, to try and restore it so that it still kind of keeps that historical feel to it. I mean, there's even I guess you would call it. It was a saloon where all the what would you call them?
The 49ers, for lack of a better.
Yeah, 49. Yeah, they would all go and
the gold rushers.
Yeah, the gold rushers would go there, and of course they could have all their needs satisfied. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more. So it was really just fascinating to kind of wander down through there. And they've got all sorts of jewelry shops and whatnot. So yeah, there's a lot of touristy type stores there. But they do their best to try and really retain that Alaskan sense of wilderness and spirit.
Yeah, it was really great. Up at the top, so we saw several glaciers up there. I mean, there's just glaciers everywhere. Obviously in Alaska, we're way up north. And we were only on the peninsula.
Yeah.
We didn't get up to real Alaska, if you will. So we were on the peninsula. And so we came back to the ship, and then we took off that evening or afternoon sometime, and we sailed down to Juneau. And actually in Juneau, there are only 2 ways to get into Juneau. You cannot drive into Juneau. It's either fly in there or you come in by boat. And I was marveling at the runway as we were coming into Juneau early in the morning, because I was out on deck, and I managed to.
Is that when you fell?
That's when I fell flat on my, what. My feet just went right out from under me, and I was right on the deck. Anyway, so I was watching the runway of the airport, and I thought, that's an awfully short runway. And actually, it was long enough for a 737. He had to really,
It looks
there,
it looks like a little municipal airport.
Yeah, but there were several 737s, obviously. Alaska
Well, I guess
Airlines,
they need them
coming in there, and it was really fascinating. So
we got off the ship, and we then hopped onto a bus. At which point we then drove through downtown Juneau. Quite interesting. It's a very modern type city.
Yep.
And it's one of those places where the population pretty much stays the same. They might have a little bit of fluctuation between summer and winter, but for the most part, it doesn't really shift that much, not like Skagway does.
Right. And because Juneau is the state capital, and they've tried to move it up to Anchorage a couple of times, but it's actually passed the legislature.
It's passed the legislature, but when
the cost
to do it will be just way too expensive.
Too expensive. Anyway.
So they've never bothered to do it.
Sure.
But then we went into Mendenhall Park.
Yeah, there's a
rainforest.
A rainforest surrounding the Mendenhall Glacier, and it's really fascinating. the rainforest. We took a little trip through there, and there's several markers that different time periods of where the glacier had been. So we were walking through this rainforest that was less than 100 years old, and pretty big trees at this point. But to be walking through something that's less than 100 years old, because the glacier had been covering it before, was fascinating. We saw some bear activity and
saw a little bit of that. And at one point we stopped on a bridge over this little stream, and we actually could see salmon that had arrived. That was going to be their spawning ground.
Yep. And they were doing all the weird spawning rituals and whatnot. It was really fascinating.
It was really amazing to watch. And I mean, the entire rainforest was strikingly beautiful.
It really was. And then we came around the corner, and there was the Mendenhall Glacier. Oh my God.
And all its glory. And boy, was it amazing.
It really, really was. I got a number of photos of the Mendenhall Glacier, and it was
spectacular.
It was impressive. Yeah, and there was the one rainfall or waterfall. They said that's only about 10 years old. That it's sprung up. So it really fascinating. So we got back on
the bus.
And
then came the fun part. Like, that wasn't fun already.
Exactly.
This was all part of the same port adventure. This was a 2-part port adventure, but still it was all part of the same one. We then went down to a little marina.
Yep.
Where they have these small boats.
And not Bobby's Marina.
Not Bobby's Marina. And if anybody wants to know about that, we will share that with you at a later time.
Yes.
But we went to this marina, and there was this small boat, and everybody in our tour group, we got onto this boat, and we went way out. Oh, we went out, it was about 45 minutes?
Roughly, yeah.
To this area of water where the humpback whales like to swim around. A beautiful photo safari opportunity.
And then we saw our first whale sign.
Shiolud.
Oh, sorry, that's wrong. That's worm sign.
That's worm sign.
Not whale sign.
Oh, you fooled me.
Anyway, so we saw that, and we saw him just kind of. We didn't really see anything, but on the other side of the boat, there was another about a mile or 2 miles away, a bunch of boats that were gathered around.
Oh, I wouldn't even think that far out.
Yeah, well,
maybe 1/4 of a mile or 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah, but anyway, it was enough distance that they were away from us, and there were some whales that were doing some things over there. So we kind of journeyed over there, and right as we got in place, and he said, "Get your cameras ready," and it was wow. 2 humpback whales, a double breach. They both jumped up out of the water and hit the water at the same time. I think I got the splashes. I didn't get them.
Yeah, I got this. No, actually, I didn't even get the splash. I turned around to see the splash beginning to kind of dissipate, and I thought, well, crap.
Yeah, it was a double breach, and I saw it, and it was incredible. And our skipper,
our captain, yeah,
he said he hadn't seen that all season.
He said that was the best thing he'd ever seen all year.
Yep. So then we hung around there, and those 2 whales were, they
were breaching like mad.
Breaching, and he kept doing what they call a chin slap, and the reason they do that is they get an itch on their chin,
on their skin,
which is gigantic, and then they'll jump up out of the water, and then they'll hit the water, which kind of scratches that itch.
Yeah.
And they kept doing that, and we would see,
But yeah, there was this one that he must have had a really good itch on his chin, because he repeatedly was breaching and then hitting the water with his chin. He did this a number of times, and luckily I think all of us managed to get at least one good shot of that happening.
Yeah. I had done to that point on this trip like 384 photos. I did a lot at the Tracy Arm Fjord and a lot on the train. But then I actually filled up my card, and I hadn't brought the extra card with me.
Oh dear.
I had only brought my camera, but I filled up my card 1,250 photos from 384 to 1,250 of those whales breaching and all of the things. I cannot find a term to describe
how amazing that experience was.
Oh my God. It truly was incredible. I had a great time with that. And so they went back in, and we were actually the last tour to go out of the marina.
There was supposed to be another one that day, but they canceled.
The wind kind of came up, and it was pretty rough getting back, but it was.
And yet I slept, I was able to sleep all the way back in.
But then, and Juneau was a short day. So
yeah.
Then we got back on the ship, and the next port of call was Ketchikan.
Ketchikan.
And it was Ketchikan that I was watching. That had the small airport. Juneau's pretty good size. It was Ketchikan.
Ketchikan's got the small one?
Yes, it had. It's real small runway, and it was amazing. And we didn't do a port adventure there.
No, we decided not to. In fact, nobody in our little group that we talked about earlier, none of us decided to do a port adventure there. No, wait a minute. Because the Blunts, they did the zip lining in Juneau.
Right, they did this, but I don't think anybody did any.
I don't think any of us did a port adventure in Ketchikan, even though there were some.
Yeah, and we just chose not to. And Ketchikan is a pretty decent little town. I mean, it's like 4 blocks by 6 blocks or something like that.
Yeah.
So we walked around and had a great time and did some shopping and
we were all craving fish and chips.
All craving fish and chips, so we had fish and chips and we did a little shopping. Like I said, there's in all of these towns, there's 5 million jewelry stores.
Yeah.
But there was some other really neat little places.
And that actually, the fact that we went at this time was really a good thing because that was the last Disney cruise ship for the year. And there were going to be like maybe just 1 or 2 more ships for that tourism season before they closed up. So everything was like, it was like a fire sale.
Yeah, 75% off for everything. So it was great. Ketchikan was a fun little town, and it was a short day as well. So we got back on the ship, and then, we had a day at sea, and we had brunch at Palo which is Northern Italian cuisine.
It's one of their high-end restaurants.
Adults only dining, and we got the private room because we had a group of 7, and it was absolutely the food. The brunch for Palo is the way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, their regular dinner is great, but brunch is fantastic.
The brunch is amazing.
I was so full.
Yeah. And I think it's at this point that I want to express something that a lot of people tell me their misgivings whenever I say that, oh yeah, we just went on a Disney cruise or we're about to go on one. They said, isn't that really for kids? And I have to say, no. Absolutely not. You do not have to be a kid. You do not have to be part of a family, with parents and children in order to enjoy a Disney cruise. This is our 4th cruise that we've done.
Yep.
And we have loved every single one of them. And we saw a lot of adults there, a lot of adults without kids there. It is just such a great time. There's so many things that we can do on the ship. And for example, as you alluded to earlier, Keith, the alcohol tasting.
Yeah, the wine tastings were great.
Wine tastings were amazing.
The champagne tasting. I mean, you taste, and they pour a little more than what is a normal taste. A normal taste is 1 ounce or 1.5 ounces or something. They usually pour about 2 ounces. So you get almost a full glass of wine for these wine tastings, and you taste 5 different ones.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the champagne tasting. We tasted 5 different ones, and we did the whiskey tasting, 2 different whiskey tastings because he tasted different whiskeys.
Oh, we should share how that came about.
Yeah, we were there. We'd done the whiskey tasting, on a previous cruise and enjoyed it tremendously. In fact, the one that we did last year on the Fantasy, we were joined by 5 Scotsmen in their kilts.
Yeah.
So it was, an Irish bartender.
And an Irish bartender. Yeah. Our host was Irish, and the Scots were there, and they were already somewhat lit, if you know what I mean. So yes, it's like, oh, hey, I get a floor show at the same time. Isn't this wonderful?
So this one, we were doing the wine tasting. And actually, the guy that was setting up the different tastings, we talked about doing the whiskey tasting, and I don't know, it came up in conversation that there were 2 whiskey tastings.
But he said, we're doing 2 of them. Which one do you want to do? And we said, we'll pick. And then at one point he said, well, they're not going to be the same.
Exactly. So we decided to do.
Let's do both.
And then we did a cognac tasting. So It really, it's that for adults. There's some private clubs for adults. We did.
Oh man.
What was it? Karaoke. I'm so upset that we didn't discover early on this one club in
Wave bands.
And
wow.
we did karaoke and danced our crazy butts off, and then the next night we did the 80s retro.
It was
night.
80s retro night.
Oh my god, that was a free-for-all.
Yeah,
we won't
that was
even
insane.
talk about that.
We won't talk about it. Needless to say that I did some pretty outrageous things, and I was stone cold sober during that time too. But we had such an amazing time,
and Tom and Brigitte.
Tom and Brigitte joined us on one night.
Actually, they joined us for one of the whiskey tastings,
and they followed us down.
Tasting, and I think they did the champagne tasting, and we went to wave bands with them, and just had a great time.
Had a great time, and then two of the other nights the Blunts were with us, and we just had it was so much fun. I did not know that I could have that level of fun, and it made me kind of feel pretty good because I mean I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 53 years old, and Keith and I, we were just able to dance with the best of them, and we closed the club.
Yeah, and the DJ said, "Oh my gosh, this is the first time on this cruise." Or
the first time in 3 cruises.
In 3 cruises that somebody was actually there at closing time. So
yeah, it never happened before. He was actually quite pleased with it.
DJ Dan.
Dan was his name. I mean, we had so much fun. I mean, it really allowed, not to spin off some psychobabble, but I was able to let my inner kid out, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, we had a great time. Lots of stuff for adults to do on the Disney cruises. Adults only section of one of the decks that has a bar and a coffee shop and a private pool and all kinds of different things. So there's a lot for adults to do. And of course, we sat in the coffee shop and napped several times.
Read. But I at this time I really want to tip my hat to the people who worked on that cruise ship for that particular vacation. Those people were amazing.
Yes.
They were so incredibly attentive. If there was any kind of issue, any kind of problem whatsoever, all we had to do was bring it up to somebody, and they would then bend over backwards to make sure that our needs were addressed. It really was magical. I mean, I realize it's a word that gets thrown out a lot, especially whenever you're talking about Disney, but I can't think of another term for it. It was a truly magical experience.
It truly was. So that was our 7-night cruise to Alaska with 3 days in Vancouver before.
It was the best vacation I've ever had.
Yep, it truly was. Okay, that should do it for this episode of TG Geeks Webcast. Remember that you can comment on Facebook or our website, tggeeks.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 469-TG-GEEKS. That is 469-844-3357. From TG Geeks or TG Squared Studios, I'm Keith Lane. Thanks for listening.
Cheers!